All right, so I think we're ready to go ahead and get started. That feels like a yes.
Yes.
All right, so I just want to welcome everyone. This is a meeting of the Prince George's County Climate Action Plan Implementation Task Force. Today is March 13th, 2024. We go to the first slide. Let's just get this on the road. I think this will be a relatively short meeting. So I am calling to order this meeting. What I'm going to ask you to do is, if you are a voting member, that is, you are the appointing authority or director of the agency organization that is on the voting list, which I'll show you in a moment, or you are a person who is delegated to be the vote this evening, if you will please drop in the chat the agency or entity that you are representing tonight, so that we can take attendance that way, rather than going through a roll call vote, which I don't think is going to wind up being necessary tonight. So again, if you are the person who's voting for your agency, drop your entity, drop your agency or entity into the chat so that we have your name and who you are voting for tonight. Thank you very much. The first task that we have to do is approve the task force number 4 meeting minutes, which were shared in the informational folder that we shared with all task force members. And so, since we are going to be running this evening via the Roberts Rules of Order, since the county code does not specify what rules of order we're supposed to use for a task force, we're choosing those. I would ask someone to please make a motion to approve those task force meetings from meeting number 4.
Motion, Stanley Early.
And could someone please second that motion?
Second, Jonathan Butler, OCS.
Either by a raise of hands or dropping it in the chat or saying aye. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Fabulous. That was so easy. So next, what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go over the strategies. We're going to talk about how we got to where we are. We're going to have a statement from our residents about their involvement in this process and their hopes for how it continues. Then we're going to vote on those strategies, and then we'll talk about next steps. So next slide. So this is just a reminder of what the voting entities are. Department of Environment, Office of Central Services, DPI, DPWT, Office of Emergency Management, Department of Housing and Community Development, Housing Authority, Redevelopment Authority, DCAO for Economic Development, Health Department, Prince George's County Planning Department, Prince George's County Department of Parks and Recreation, a representative designated by the County Council, a representative designated by the Climate Resident Advisory Group, the Economic Development Corporation, the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, Prince George's County Public Schools, Prince George's County Municipal Association representative, and FSC First. We also have some folks who've been valuable contributors to this process who are not voting members, because we realized how much we needed their help as we got a little further into this process. And that thank you just goes to the Soil Conservation District, the Office of Management and Budget, and the county stat that have all been really helpful in moving this process forward. Next slide, please.
Andrea, I may have created a problem because I just made the motion on the minutes and I didn't realize I was non-voting. So, all right.
We had all ayes, so we'll just,
okay.
We'll just take it.
Okay.
All right, so just a quick reminder of the high-level goals. So, we set some goals both through the county executive order and then adopted by the county council around reducing countywide carbon emissions by 50% compared with our 2005 levels by 2030, and to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. And then make significant progress to be a climate resilient county within a climate resilient region. Next slide, please. The commitments that we made in the leadership portion of the climate action plan included to being leaders on climate, focusing around community health as, a major factor in environmental justice, making that transition to renewable energy, focusing on smart growth and clean transportation, making the transition to a climate resilient county something that focuses around business development and opportunity for all of our residents and those beyond, making sure that our residents' homes are resilient, and that we maintain the multi-generational wealth that is in our homes, focusing around justice and equity, and ensuring that we have adequate and open public engagement. Next slide. So some of the high-level strategies that we brainstormed around on our very first task force meeting were around decarbonizing electricity, expanding renewable energy, reducing our transportation emissions, reducing waste, promoting carbon sequestration on both our natural lands and our working agricultural lands, preserving our natural areas for adaptation, prioritizing education and professional development in the climate fields, creating workforce development and economic opportunities, and building transparency and accountability into climate action implementation. Next slide. So just a reminder about who the Climate Resident Advisory Group is. This is currently 32 residents. We can go up to 50 residents, and this resident advisory group exists beyond just the task force to advise our agency right now, DOE, but also looking at having this group or similar groups advise other agencies as laid out in the strategies. Like I said, we have 32 residents from across the county. We have a representative tonight who will vote with us. They have been holding their own calls. They've done really a yeoman's effort in trying to make sure that the needs of all of our communities and all of our residents are represented as broadly as they possibly can by really working across the community with those stakeholders who don't have the time or ability to be a part of this group. And they also ran 3 parallel work groups while we were running the regular work groups and set representatives to this work group. So they really just did a ton of work on their own time to make this work as well as it possibly could. So I just really wanted to highlight the work that they've done and say thank you, and make sure that we all, understand that this is something that will be continuing into the future under these implementation strategies. Next slide. So what have we done? What were we trying to achieve? So we had the Climate Action Plan, which was created by the Climate Action Commission, which is a combination of residents, experts, and members of the county government. What we wanted to do was take those recommendations and figure out how do we make them into actionable strategies that the county can actually do, right? What is within our control? What would it take from an operational and SOPs perspective to actually achieve these things? What are the foundational pieces of information we need? The studies. Where are we going to get the money? And who's responsible to do these various things? So at this point, right now, we have gotten to the point that we have developed 13 strategies together. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we got there. And then we'll have another phase where we have 4 strategies left, because there were 4 strategies that we just didn't have, perhaps the combination of the way we were doing the process and making sure that we had all the right people at the table. We weren't comfortable saying that we had come to a real consensus around the implementation of those strategies. So next slide. So we have these 3 work groups, the County Operations and Engagement Work Group, the Energy and Infrastructure Work Group, and the Land Use Development and Transportation Work Group. And all of you had representatives at each of these work groups, or at least one of these work groups, in most cases 2 or sometimes even 3 of these work groups, as we worked together through each of the recommendations to determine how they worked. Were they technically accurate? Did they have holes in them? Did we have what we needed to do to achieve them? Were they the right things for us to achieve? Were they achievable within, county government? And we achieved these 13 complete strategies for adoption by the task force this evening. Next slide. So what are those 13 strategies and where did they come from? So the 13 strategies that you all have been reviewing that are in the task force folder are these 13 that are listed here: dams and levees, extreme heat, resilience hubs, food, internal capacity, climate criteria, community engagement, electric vehicles, telework, energy efficiency, benchmarking, waste, and trees. So over the course of the last year, while you've been working in the working groups, what we did was we collected every piece of information from the working groups, from individual interviews with many of you and the experts inside of your divisions, from the CRA, and then with the help of our consultants. And we took all of this information that we've reviewed with you and gone over in all of these working groups, and we pulled it together into one consolidated attempt to put us on the right track to achieving these things and figure out, again, like an SOP of the steps of how to get there. You can see in this crosswalk that will be in the front matter of the report that we're going to be submitting to the county executive that we took the original climate action plan priority recommendations, we reviewed those, we reviewed other information, we reviewed the expertise and the missions of the different agencies, but we combined those down from what was originally 26 to we've got 13 here and another 4 that still need additional work. But these are the 13 that we are looking to adopt tonight, with 3 of them really being the central leadership things that we need to achieve to have the foundation to build off of, whether it be the expertise within the government, whether it be the foundational studies, whether it be looking at how we do things around equity and environmental justice. All of those pieces are the foundational pieces to being able to get the rest of this work done. And then we have the strategies that, again, we were able to achieve a level of consensus on and then published for your review and editing. I will say that the edits that we received, none of them rose to the level of an amendment. So you will see that there's a redlined version. We provided it as a redlined version as people were going along and making edits. And those redlined versions will be finalized with a little bit of word tweaking and a few things that were missing, particularly some pieces from the final budget that we wanted to get the most accurate information about what was reflected in the final fiscal year 25 budget. And they will be adapted with some front matter that, you know, discusses where we are in the climate crisis, what information that we have, a lot of the things that were in the climate action plan, but updated, that really talk about where we are and where we want to go, and also what other communities are doing around this type of strategic planning and this type of action. And then the next steps that we still have. So next slide. So we're not going to try to focus exactly on how we're going to achieve next steps tonight. Our goal is to get this piece of this work done, get it to the county executive, get the initial dashboard up on the website that will reflect what we've done since 2020 and even before 2020 as a county, to get where we are now. And there are a lot of things to celebrate. There's a lot of achievements. Almost every agency has something that they can represent themselves as, you know, making a significant strides towards being more resilient in light of climate change. Even in many cases with programs and projects that you didn't think of as being climate resilience, but simply reactive to the world around you, or simply being better at planning than we ever have been before. Because I think that as a county government, we've really been committed to what are the things that could happen, perhaps because we went through COVID together, perhaps because we have had that driving focus from our leadership, but there are so many things that we can look at over the last, 4 years and say, hey, we've done a whole heck of a lot. So we're going to both publish the strategies and celebrate the wins and develop a dashboard so that we can measure all of those wins. You'll see a few come out during Climate Month, but our hope is by the summer to really be able to talk about all of those things that different agencies were able to achieve. So what's left? Like I mentioned, there are 4 strategies that are left, and we don't think that this work group structure is likely to work to actually achieve this. We've learned a lot of things through this work group structure that, some things work, some things don't work. There's a lot of successes, but there's things that could have been done a lot better, could have been done a lot more efficiently, could have been done a lot more quickly. And so we're going to work with you to develop what are the things that we need to do next. With targeted work groups to solve these, these last issues that are in many ways some of the deepest, most complex things that we're working on. And also in many cases already have work groups working on them inside of the county government that we simply need to expand to additional partners to make sure that we can have a holistic conversation on them. So next slide. So these are the 4 primary things that are left: stormwater standards, land use, codes and standards, and renewables. And you can see, just like the other ones on the last column on the right, that these came from the Climate Action Plan priorities. And so we're combining those together. And again, we're not ready to talk tonight about how we want to do that. We really want to have a conversation with you guys individually to find out what worked and what didn't work for you during the overall process. But we're going to do that, and we're going to come up with a plan. And in the next month or so, we will have a conversation around that and actions on how to get these last 4 items moving forward. Next slide. So what we're doing tonight, just to reiterate, is that we are going to discuss voting on the adoption of these 13 initial measures, and work to get these ones going, get them combined, get them submitted, so that we have a document and implementation strategy that we can all be proud of and proud of being a part of. But before we go to voting, what I did want to do was give an opportunity for the or were we going to do, can someone remind me whether we're doing the climate resident advisory before or after the voting? Because I've actually forgotten. Brandy?
Before, now's good.
Okay, so we are doing it now. Okay, so I'm sorry. So I wanted to give the climate resident advisory, I should have just gone with what I thought, what my gut was. The climate resident advisory group an opportunity to speak about their experience through this process. And then we will move into discussing the strategies themselves and any concerns and discussion that we want to have, and then we'll move into voting.
Thank you so much, Andrea. So this evening, I'm Layla Riazi, and I'm here to represent the Climate Resident Advisory group. So first, I want to thank you for the work that you have done on this effort. I wanted to share a little bit more about what the CRA has been doing, especially in these last 2 weeks. Most of the CRA members that I'm working with have been here throughout the entire year. That means that we've had over 18 meetings since January of 2023. We have, in just these past 2 weeks, met several times. We are, it's often forgotten that many of the people who are part of the CRA are experts in a number of areas that are important to this plan, and they're active leaders. We're all active leaders in our communities. And what we bring to this is the voice, stretching across residents, stretching across the county. So I think it's important for you to hear that, and I believe that we submitted around 70 or 80 comments with this process. But we're here to thank you for responding to the urgent reality that all the people of Prince George's County are already suffering the impact of climate change. This is most especially true for those residents who are already in overburdened and often overlooked communities. We need bold climate action now, and I appreciate you being here, this evening for that. In the strategies we hope to have recommended here this evening, it begins with immediate action on implementation strategies 1, 2, and 3. And we're bringing those forward especially because we need that, bringing forward the climate forward leadership and the structures integration and the equitable engagement essential for implementing climate action. One of the things that I did want to say is that we have seen incredible progress in these draft strategies. We also, as many of you have, we've also been very frustrated with the process trying to navigate how do we get to here. But there are elements, there are bold steps and elements of each of these strategies to support sound climate action. But there are aspects of these strategies, quite honestly, that don't reach far enough to meet our CRA goals. And we're going to challenge the task force and whatever comes after this to do more and to be more for that. But through our frustrations, we're reminding ourselves that the work is just beginning. What I hope will come out of this meeting here is that we will be ready for immediate action, as Andrea has referenced, to develop the difficult strategies, the things about codes and standards, land use, stormwater standards, and renewables, and that we step into a lead the way, robust strategies that we can be proud to advance into the county's climate action implementation plan. We believe that the structures that we have seen provided by these initial implementation strategies and the momentum that I hope comes from this evening will offer all of us involved the energy we need to dive into the hard stuff. And I bring that up because these forthcoming strategies are vital to the development of a substantive climate action implementation plan. Without bold action on these strategies that I just mentioned, every bit of progress on the easier strategies will be undone, set back, or completely overwhelmed. But we're here because it matters, just like you're here because it matters. And we're ready to work with you to ensure equity, because all residents of our county deserve to have good jobs, good health and wellness, good futures that all come with a cleaner, greener, more sustainable Prince George's County. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Layla. Before we move to voting, I wanted to open it up as to whether there were any questions about process, any questions or concerns about the strategies themselves that anyone wanted to raise.
So Andrea, this is Jonathan, Office of Central Services. So once we've completed voting tonight, these 13 strategies, whatever pieces that we're adopting, is that something that will then be formally submitted to the county executive or to the council? Just what would be the next steps after that?
Correct. So per the executive order, these are formally submitted to the county executive. We'll make them public as well. They're going to be packaged real nicely. We're going to have some front matter with them and, you know, some background on everyone that was involved and how they were involved in the process and all of those things. And my deepest apologies to David Iannucci, whose name was spelled wrong in the initial thing. That will not happen to anyone this time. I am truly and deeply sorry. I may have finished that the night before my maternity leave, so I was a little bit perhaps not my best version of self, but so yes, we're working with LIDC, we're working with University of Maryland's Environmental Finance Center has been working with us this whole time and has really done a ton of effort to get us to this point, and with ICF to finalize things, include all the pieces of the budget that are missing, and package something up that can be submitted to the county executive.
Great, thanks, appreciate that.
Andrea, I have a couple of concerns in regard to the Department of Parks and Recreation. If possible, I would like Lauren Bell to comment on list 2 and Miss 11, I think it is. We just would like to share our concerns with the group before we go into the voting format, if we could.
Absolutely.
So Lauren, go for it.
Thanks, Steve. Actually, I'm going to leave Miss 11 to Megan, who is the tree expert from MNC PPC, but I'm going to comment on the climate action criteria. There's some major concerns in MNC PPC in general with the CIP funding process. And then the fact that there's no climate action criteria outlined prior to when this vote is happening. And there's also no lead agencies named for this. And it's going to affect pretty much everything we do in relation to our CIP programs. So just keep that in mind as we move forward, because it doesn't seem like it's ready to be voted on yet. Go ahead, Megan.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Megan Reiser. I'm an environmental planner with the planning department, representing our planning director with this effort. So we had some major concerns with MIS 11. It seems that there were some major changes that were made throughout the strategies, including just even the title of the strategy, the implementation summary statement, which don't really reflect the language that we felt was agreed upon in the work group meetings. And there are some strategies that are not really aligned with the subtitle 25 update, the Woodland Conservation Ordinance and the Tree Canopy Cover Ordinance that is currently underway to address some of the state mandates that came to us from last year's legislative session. So, you know, while it seems like we're, moving in the right direction, it just doesn't appear that that this particular one is at a stage where we could vote in favor this evening. So thank you.
So could I take that as an amendment of a proposal to remove MIS 11 and return it to the table of ones that need to be further worked on? So that would mean that I would be proposing the amendment that we remove MIS 11, that we table it with the remaining other areas, although we might want to include it in sort of like the land use group. But and then that the remaining strategies, it seems like there's a small change that needs to be made to climate criteria. Although I think at this point we adopted the recommendations that I know there were some recommendations in LIS2 in the red line to include who were the actionable agencies. But I would be comfortable, because I understand with the Section 25 update that there's a lot going on, with proposing an amendment to remove MIS 11. Would that be an accurate kind of statement of where you feel like we are?
I would definitely support Lauren's comments on the LIS2 as well, and I think we would agree to remove the number 11.
All right, does anybody
Parks and Rec
have
definitely agrees
statements that they want to make on the proposal for an amendment to remove MIS 11, table it for now and come back to it in the future section? So does anybody have a comment specifically on that? I see there's some hands raised, but I want to know if I see Alex and Barry have their hands raised. If either of you want to make a specific comment on that?
Not specifically on that, no.
Okay, all right, so let's handle this one then. So we do have a quorum. So I'm going to make the motion for us to remove MIS 11 and table it for later. Is there someone who would like to second that motion?
Steve Carter.
I second.
Second.
All right, so all those in favor either say aye or raise a hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? All right, so that is where we are now. What we would be voting to adopt later this evening would be everything that you see on this table with the exception of MIS 11. And then I saw Alex had his hand up next, and then I'm going to pass over facilitation to Brandy for a little while. Brandy, did you hear me pass over facilitation to you?
I sure did.
All right. And then
Yes.
Dawn will be weighing in for the department.
Good evening, Andrea and others. I had a concern about L1, the hiring of a climate officer for the county, and I believe that position was to be housed in the county executive's office. I know we had a number of discussions as to who would be hired and who would be part of the process of hiring them, and I had specifically talked about council engagement in that. I don't know why those comments did not get onto the this agenda here. So I am not in favor. I will not vote for L1 simply because we had asked to have council, a partnership with the county executive in this process. We weren't even made partners within this specific process. I didn't see the council named anywhere with this one task. So I have to speak up about that. And again, I'm not sure why we were not included in the process to, make a decision on who would be hired and again, be a partner in the hiring of this individual.
Hi, Alex. This is Dawn. I'm not going to turn on my camera. It's been causing some problems today. But we are in the process of developing material for that position. So that package is being prepared as we speak. So we will have to consider your comments as we finalize that our draft package for further review by our management.
So is this going to be a back and forth between you and I, or are we going to you're going to bring it before the council as a whole to review what the process of hiring and what the requirements will be, or how is that going to work? Or
My
is that-
understanding is that it will be proposed in the budget this year. So this is a budget this year proposal. So it will be proposed in our budget as to hiring this person, although they may actually be hired before our goal is to hire them before the current budget cycle. So we have a position that's allocated to the Department of Environment. That position is going to be allocated to this position. It is at the level that it was approved by the council. It is funded in a way that it is equal amongst the different areas that work on climate. And so it is the proposal of leadership to go ahead and hire into that position, but place that position rather than in the Department of Environment in the CAO's office, so that they're able to better coordinate across all of the agencies, right? Because we've been running this out of one department and we want to have a more equal approach to it across all of the agencies. So we have the position right now. The position will be continue to be described in the next budget, asking for continued funding of that position. It is a position that was already approved, but again, it's just being elevated to a higher level so that it can do this work across a much broader audience and raise it to the level of visibility that was both asked for the climate action in the climate action plan and then was discussed in various work group meetings. So our goal again is for it to be visible, for it to have direct access to leadership, and for it to be able to work across many offices. But it is a funded position that will be asked to be funded again in fiscal year 2025.
Andre, I think that Alex's big suggestion earlier on was that he was interested in having council be able to be a part of the hiring process. And I'm not sure whether procedurally that is something that is, there's precedence for that or how that functions, but that was one of the things that Alex.
This is not an appointed position, Alex. This is a hired standard position. So my understanding is that no, that's not.
That's not what is in L1. The L1 says that it will be hired and placed. The individual will be placed in the county executive's office, and that's what we had asked for in several meetings when we had this discussion. It was a little bit contentious, but it was the understanding of most people that if this position is not in the county executive's office, they're going to have to answer to the DCAOs and others, and their position would lack the power to be able to get things done. So that was
I would argue that the CAO's office is the county executive's office, which is why it was placed with the CAO. But yes, it is not a appointed position, is what I'm telling you, is that it is a regular hired position. So we are going to hire an expert in the same way that we would hire anyone for county government. So it's a permanent county government position that is being placed in the county executive's office.
Okay, I thought you had just said it was going to be in your department. So did I misunderstand?
No, it's funded. It's the position's funded in our department.
Funded in your office.
The money
placed
comes
in the
from
county
me.
executive's office.
Right. But the position does not report to me. They're just funded through me. So this position is already funded by county council last year. We took that position and we have now placed that position in the county executive's office.
Okay, that sounds very good. That's a strange twist that it's going to be a merit position in the county executive's office, but I'm happy that person is going to be in that office. So hopefully it will work out. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, a number of DOE merit positions are assigned to the county executive's office because they don't have merit positions. So that's just it's kind of the same as the federal government. It's the only way to fund it.
Very good. Thank you.
But I promise we can hire ASAP.
Let's go to Layla really quickly, because I know you had a comment on Alex's comment.
My comment is resolved. I was just going to urge, let's move this forward. This of all implementation strategies needs to be moved forward now, and it needs to be moved forward as a professional, higher position, not as an appointed position in any way, shape, or form.
And then Mary, I saw your hand was up earlier, Mary Giles.
Yeah, I had just one comment on LIS2. It makes mention of throughout the document, it makes mention of a climate resilience checklist, which is a great idea. It can inform people's decision-making as they're reviewing projects, whether public or private. But it also mentions the requirement of a pre-development environmental impact statement. And that in EIS is it's a process that's used for publicly managed federal and state projects, where say you're building a highway and you're trying to decide on 7 different alignments, and you go through this pretty elaborate EIS process to be able to decide on the alignment of a road that's the least environmentally impactful. So it makes sense in the public domain for state and federal projects, but for privately held land, that person owns that land. They're not looking at 10 other sites. They already own that land. And so, yes, they have to do lots of environmental studies, wetlands, floodplains, trees, traffic, noise. They do a lot of the same studies that go into an environmental impact statement, but the whole aspect of an EIS where you're looking at multiple different sites just doesn't seem to comport with your typical privately held permit project. So I just hope that the final version of this can be written in a manner that makes sense for public versus private projects. So.
Mary, do you have an amendment that you'd like to put forward, or is that just something that you want folks to consider when they're developing the sort of the rubrics after this is adopted?
I guess the amendment I would suggest putting forward is that a formal EIS requirement pertain to public projects, not projects pertaining to privately held land. That would be my amendment. Yeah.
And then is there another form of oversight that you would suggest would be more appropriate for the private permits that could incorporate resilience?
Yeah, I think there's recommendation to develop a climate resilience checklist and an analysis, and that perhaps that's what should be done on these privately held projects, that following the climate resilience checklist and the climate resilience analysis. Yeah.
Layla?
My observation is that is more something that is a correction that could be put in that would not rise to the level of an amendment for this, because we, as I understand, are trying to avoid going through and at this point in time introducing amendments. I think that that's a clarification in there of the purpose of that. And Mary, I don't know if you would agree that at least how you've explained it, it's just noting that there is something that serves for the private, that this specifically is about the county level projects, and just making that distinction rather than an amendment. Is that something that could be done, Brandy, for this?
Yeah, no, I think we could.
Thank you.
Mary, would that satiate your concerns on this particular implementation strategy?
Yeah, just as long as we have an understanding. I mean, we're not writing code here.
Yeah.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Are there other thoughts or comments on any of the specific strategies? If there are no other concerns or thoughts on any of the strategies, Dawn, if you want to maybe hold the vote, given that we had the one amendment that passed with regard to holding trees off, with the other 4 that will be dealt with later. And then the technical edits that we'll do for LIS2 and LIS. Yeah, it was LIS2, I think.
Okay. Sure. So with regard to the vote, if I could get a second on moving forward with the proposed 13 budget strategies absent MS 11, and with clarification to LIS 2 as discussed with Mary Giles and Layla Riazi. If I could get a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
From a discussion standpoint, I did notice that some of the implementation strategies did not identify a lead, like a lead agency or entity to carry them forward. The responsible lead and then the secondary partners. So some of them had that as to be determined. So this is more of a question, which is when will that be determined?
We will have to decide when that would be determined. It could be determined in the next several months, or it could be at a later time as we're prepared to fully move forward with implementation.
Okay,
But it will
thank
be
you.
determined at some point in time before we advance to full implementation or start a full implementation.
Okay, thank you, Dawn.
Sure. Okay.
Layla, I see their hands up.
Yes, I wanted to speak to MIS 11 and its withdrawal. I will say that not moving forward immediately on MIS 11 is extremely challenging for the CRA, given the importance of everything that is in here. But one of the things that I'm intending to do by the direction of the CRA is to acknowledge that we need to move all of this forward. I am just putting out there that this needs action immediately. To have anything that we're saying that is a climate implementation plan that leaves out maintaining a climate resilient, equitable forest and urban tree canopy cover just rings false. So please, I understand that there are things that are coming forward, but this is a living, breathing plan, and we're going to have to continue to work with that. So I will support on behalf of the CRA for action now, but please let that be known how critical this is to a robust climate action plan, just like implementation plan, just like the other four, but to have nothing in there for this is really a challenge.
Thank you, Layla. Any further discussion? Hearing none, do we move forward with the vote? All in favor by raise of hands? Please see all. Any opposed?
Which one are we speaking on again?
We're looking at all listed strategies absent MIS 11, which will be removed from the 13 that you see on the screen.
Yeah, I vote yes. Thank you.
Sure.
Jonathan, is your hand raised to speak?
Oh, sorry.
It's just raise as a raise of hand.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. To approve.
Did we get a count of all? It looks like any opposed to the strategy of the 13 strategies absent MIS 11? No. I think we're good. I think that we have, or the task force has reached consensus around the strategies that shall move forward, absent MIS 11.
Dawn, as a point of clarification, I was a little slow in hitting the raise hand when for your first round of voting in support. So representing DPI, we were supporting these amendments. Yeah.
Thank you, Mary. Brandy, do we need anyone to drop their in favor in the chat, or we've captured it sufficiently?
If you guys can, because Mary mentioned that she was a little late on the trigger and we want to make sure we have clarity. If you could just drop in the chat if you are in favor, that way we could have a clear record and there's no misunderstandings. Just let us know in favor in the chat if you're a voting member. And then I didn't hear anyone say they were not in favor or that they were opposed. If you are opposed, go ahead and throw it in the chat as well. But again, I didn't hear anyone say opposed earlier. So we just want to make sure we have a good record.
I'm not seeing any in the chat.
I'm not seeing any in the chat.
Brandy, I think that closes the vote.
Excellent.
Thank you so much. Appreciate everyone's participation in the vote.
Thank you, Dawn. So as Andrea mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we weren't expecting this meeting to go on super long, but we do want to talk a little bit about next steps. I don't know if Andrea's going to be able to join us for this section, but she had 3 things she wanted to make sure to put out in front of you. That between April and May, we will be reaching out to the various task force members to discuss meeting on the next work group steps. So as you saw, we now have 5 strategies that have sort of been tabled and that will need to be moving forward. The slide says 4, but because we tabled M11 trees, it'll now be 5 key strategies that we're going to need to figure out how we're going to address moving forward. And in addition, we're going to be working with the leads of the existing 12 strategies on how do we move forward with action. So Andrea and the DOE team will be putting together a report. It's going to the council for adoption, and hopefully that can move forward and we can get to action. Is there any major questions about next steps? I know it's still pretty fuzzy, but one of the things Andrea did mention is if there are any recommendations from you all, from the task force, as far as like the process that you've already been exposed to and things you'd like to see different. We're always interested in hearing more about how we can improve the whole process for you all. And that could be in conversation today or via email. Leila?
Yes, go ahead and lower my hand, my apologies. What we received as far as the draft implementation strategies, the first set, I think that structure for the CRA offered an opportunity to engage, a more robust opportunity to engage. So if there is a possibility of taking the things where there is not yet consensus and lay out what exists within that structure, I think it would offer something that we can start to work through. And I would like to see something like that, because that has been an ongoing frustration for the CRA about how really to engage some of this. And when we go into, depending on how the task force goes forward, when we go into those meetings, for us to have a specific structure for engagement. And then also just really trying to bring some greater energy and investment to how we engage with the task force from here on out.
Thank you, Leila. Lauren, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I just have a clarification question. Are we staying in the same 3 working groups, or are you going to create different working groups for each of the 5 remaining strategies?
Yeah, Lauren, so that's a great question. So Andrea mentioned earlier that the approach moving forward, after all the feedback we heard about the original 3 working groups, was that some of these more challenging things, right, land use codes and standards, stormwater renewables, trees, that the structure of the task force work groups earlier weren't functioning very well for those discussions. And so it'll be new work groups around those particular strategies. And I believe that Andrea on this slide here identified who they envisioned leading that work group discussion. So for the stormwater standards, it would be DOE and DPWT. For land use, it's MNC, PPC, and economic development. For codes and standards, DPI, and renewables, DOE, OCS. So those are going to be different than the ones we were in before and really focus really on those individual strategies. Again, trees will be added to this, but I'm not quite sure. I suspect DOE might be a lead for that, but I don't know who's going to take the lead there. That's for Andrea and the county to decide.
Thanks.
No problem. Are there any other questions around process or next steps? Excellent. Well, then I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time this evening and taking the time over the week or the last 2 weeks to really look through these strategy statements, provide edits and feedback and comments. And thank you for hanging in there this past year as we've been making our way through the climate action plan. We're very excited to move these 12 strategies forward to the council, and hopefully we can really see some development and action as Prince George's County takes a leading role in climate action within the region. We'll stick around if anyone has any questions, but Don, if you want to close this out officially.
Sure. Thank you again all for attending this evening and participating in the process of advancing the strategies that were voted upon this evening. We appreciate all your effort, your work, commitment of time and energy. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Great job, team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, Brandy, this is Jeff. You still on?
I am, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to flag for you an interesting development, and I'll shoot you and the team an email about it. There's a philanthropy. There's a philanthropy that has 80 years been working on like child, neurology and funding all sorts of interesting things, with a focus on children, mental health,